Well, here we are for book 16. Let me make sure this thing's on. Yep, 16. Uh, Harry Crews, The Knockout Artist. Now, I admit, I bought this book entirely for the cover. That is, as many of you will know, that is New Orleans. And I thought, hey, maybe this is a New Orleans artist. But no, it is not. He is a Southern artist. Harry Crews is a Southern artist, but he is more a Georgian artist, more Georgia than New Orleans. But this book nonetheless is mostly set in New Orleans. There are a couple of flashbacks to other places, but the bulk of the story takes place in New Orleans. And it involves a young man named Eugene Talmadge Biggs. And he is originally from rural Georgia, and he has been relocated to New Orleans because he started out in his career as a boxer, and he had, I think it's 17 fights. Anyway, he had quite a few fights where he did well. He wasn't a knockout boxer, but he won by technicalities. He won by decision. And then he went up against this guy who basically knocked him out by hitting him on the chin, and he developed from that a glass chin, and so he becomes the knockout artist because he discovers shortly after this that he's able to knock himself out by hitting himself in the chin. Now, apparently, this is a relatively rare thing to be able to do. To actually hit yourself hard enough to knock yourself out. Apparently, this is a hard thing to do. It sounds sort of dangerous and stupid to me, but also apparently a rare talent, a talent of sorts. And so Eugene's boxing career is over, and he is abandoned in New Orleans by his manager and everybody. So he starts to try to survive there, working as a waiter or a busboy at this restaurant, and then somehow he gets involved with this idea of going to parties and getting paid to hit himself in the chin and knock himself out. Okay, I don't know. This is set in New Orleans, but quite frankly, it doesn't sound like New Orleans to me, hardly at all, except in some of the place names. I don't get any kind of sense of the New Orleans that I knew living here. And Harry Crews is supposed to be, the next big name in Southern writing after, I guess, people like Walker Percy, perhaps someone like Flannery O'Connor. Certainly not the same generation as Faulkner, certainly further on than that. But, for my money, if this is an example of his talent, he doesn't have nearly the writing talent that these other guys had. It's okay, but it's not great. For one thing, I just don't buy that anyone would pay to see this guy knock himself out. To me, it's stupid. But what do I know? I'm not into boxing in the first place, and the New Orleans that he visits is the New Orleans of the kink, the New Orleans of the dissolute, the New Orleans of decadence, and when was this book written? This book was written in '88. The book was published in '88, and I was 18 in '88. And I went to the University of New Orleans, which is actually mentioned briefly in the novel. And so the quarter that it's talking about, the reality it's talking about, is, I don't know, roughly 4, 5 years before me. And I do remember that when I was at UNO, that the quarter was a bit dirty and disreputable. I do remember that one of my friends talked about, how he, drunk out of his mind, wandered around the French Quarter and found some place that, there was like really exotic, underground, illegal sex acts being performed and this kind of thing. I do remember that supposedly in the gay bars at the time that there were graphic sex acts being performed and things like this. I didn't go in, but there was a strip club in which I think there was a transsexual strip club in the court at the time, and I think there was one where sex acts were simulated between men and women. And, even later on, I know that there were strip clubs in the quarter that were a little bit dirty, where, essentially almost anything seemed to go. My personal experience, it was more talk than reality. It was more, you expected it to be dirty, and it was dirty, but it wasn't that dirty. But things change over time. The quarter has been cleaned up. So if you go to New Orleans now and you expect that kind of thing in the quarter, you will probably be very disappointed. The majority of the businesses down there now have cleaned up their act in a big way. There's a lot of corporate business now, a lot of corporate business, a lot of corporate money, a lot of, larger names and that kind of thing, and they've cleaned things up dramatically. So the dirtiness is not quite there like it used to be, and the decadence is not quite there as it used to be. Now, was the quarter ever really as dirty and as decadent as they say here? Honestly, I don't know. One of the characters in this book works at a theater, and this theater specializes in showing things like, real snuff films. A film where someone is literally killed. Don't know. Don't know if such a thing ever existed in the quarter. I know the reputation existed. And to me, that is kind of what this reads like. It reads like somebody who does not know New Orleans at all and is writing about the reputation that New Orleans has, not the reality. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Harry Crews did spend time in the quarter. Maybe he was familiar. Maybe he did write from experience. He certainly does know his way around boxing way more than I do, that's for sure. I'm not sure how accurate the boxing stuff is, but that stuff at least seems legit. I have a hard time believing somebody could write as he writes about, training as a boxer and that kind of thing without actually having been in a gym where boxing was taking place, where I have never been. So that rang kind of legit to me. And like I said, the court has been cleaned up a lot. I did try to look into Harry Crews's biography, but he is not a super huge name on the internet, and perhaps I could have looked harder, but from what little I looked for, I couldn't find anything significant about him. But all that aside, it's a decent read. I mean, so what's the story? Okay, so the story here is this guy, Eugene, is living a life in the very decadent side of New Orleans. He is very masculine and kind of an almost kind of homophobic kind of almost red pill kind of way. And he attracts the attention of this woman named Charity, who claims to be working on a dissertation in psychology. And so she studies him, and the way she studies him is she takes him home, they have sex, and while they're having sex, she records her questioning of him about intimate details and fantasies and things of that nature. Because her claim is that in the throes of passion and shortly after, she gets more honesty out of him than she would otherwise. And she has a file cabinet where she keeps the stuff. So he's kind of this kept boy. He lives in this woman's house, or an apartment that she has set up for him. She actually lives in another house. He lives in this apartment she set up for him. And the money that he makes doing this knocking himself out thing, he sends back to his family in Georgia who own a very poor farm back there that's basically failing. Okay, so he's living this life and he's increasingly getting dissatisfied with it. His friend who works at that disgusting snuff film place wants to get out of there and gets involved with a woman who is a junkie, and she's involved in some other place in the quarter that has like these really bizarre, again, probably illegal sex act kind of things. This group of people, they are all desperate. They're all doing what they can to survive, and they've all made these what we might call moral compromises, doing things against their better nature, against what they think they should be doing. The other guy, by the way, is also a former boxer. In any case, one of the guys who hires the knockout artist to do one of these kink things decides he wants to hire him for real to find a boxer and train up a boxer. So the first half of the book deals with the main character and his sort of dissolute life and this weird kind of wandering around doing this knocking out stuff and these weird kink parties and these, you know, constant parade of what you might call certain kind of Southern grotesque, you know, and a certain kind of heteronormative disgust about people who are, you know, lesbian or transsexual or black or whatever, that are not, you know, white men, because that what Eugene is a white man, and he kind of exhibits a little bit of disgust at people who are not like him, except his black friend. He's good with him. He doesn't have a problem with him. And the second half of the book deals with them finding a boxer who is a Cajun and trying to train him to be a boxer. And that half actually I found more interesting because it's very detailed how to train a boxer. And I don't know how true it is, but it was fascinating. And then the thing ends with the main character discovering that he is the subject of this psychological study, and he doesn't like all his secrets being revealed and this kind of thing. And he discovers that his friend is lying to him, and you know, and just his whole life is coming to crap. He doesn't want to do the knockout artist thing anymore, and so at the end, he just decides he's leaving, and he just takes off. And the boxer, with nowhere else to go, goes with him, and that's the end. So, decent. I think that, you know, for my money, the writing is a little stale, a little not quite so interesting. You know, there are some weird, kinky scenes, but it doesn't really read like New Orleans to me, and some of the decadence seems kind of put on and kind of fakey. Maybe there were some issues with writing it as realistically as he might have wanted to. You know, this is 1988, but still there might have been some concerns with, you know, going too far into sort of the kinky side of things, even in 88. I'm not sure. There is quite a bit of cursing and quite a bit of adult situations and things like that. So, you know, decent. I'm glad I read it. I probably will not be looking into anything by Harry Crews again anytime soon, but if something comes up, I'm not opposed to it. All right.